All right, thank you for joining us, everyone, for this morning's session. We're just going to give it a few more minutes, just ramping up on numbers. So we'll just give it a couple more minutes and then we'll get started with the session. Thank you. All right, thank you for joining us, everyone. Really appreciate both our Ingram, New Zealand and Australian team for organising today's session. Today we're going to talk about Microsoft Sophos play with Microsoft for MDR, or MDR for Microsoft Defender, and we'll cover that off in quite some detail here. We will be recording this session, and we will send these slides out after this session also. We'll also at the very end cover off some of the Ingram contacts and also some of the Sophos contacts within this session as well. So today, to start kicking off, I've got Aaron Jacobs. Aaron's one of our global solutions MDR solutions engineers, and he's going to kick off this session for this morning. Thank you, Aaron. Over to you.
Thanks, Cam. And yeah, it's quite the mouthful, Sophos MDR for Microsoft Defender. So yeah, it's a tough one. But yeah, Cam and I will take you through this today. It should be good. You'll learn a lot about different strategies for you to be able to go to market around Sophos MDR and working with Microsoft Defender for both Defender for Endpoint and otherwise, as Microsoft Defender is quite a big ecosystem in the 365 land. Now, to start things off, I'm going to talk just a little bit about what adversaries or attackers, hackers, whatever you want to call them, what they're really doing in environments today. And a lot of people, a lot of MSPs, a lot of customers, they just assume at the moment that sort of two things they think might be the biggest thing that's going on. The first is where we were, almost 5 years ago, where a user's accidentally going to click on something, or an attacker's sort of going to somehow be able to execute something in your environment, and then instantaneously ransomware is deployed. That's not really the case. That's the attackers are breaking into the environments, through vulnerabilities, through various different ways. Sometimes we have a bit of a saying, they don't break in, they just log in, because compromised credentials are a really big problem today. But once they're in, they poke around in the environment. They're looking through the environment, and this sort of screen here shows you that they gain this remote access, and then they're doing different things inside the environment. Now, some of those things you'll see here on the screen say attempt number 1, and then that it was successfully blocked. That's really common for standard antivirus products, firewalls, other solutions to block their initial, techniques to try and do things, but more so they're exploring the environment. So as MSPs, you would know when you take on a new client, you're looking around the environment, you're mapping the environment and figuring out, what servers they have and where the data lives and things of that nature. That's very much what they're doing, and ransomware being deployed is actually the last thing that occurs. So during these phases here, once they find the data, they often steal the data first, so data exfiltration, as we call it, and that happens even before ransomware as well. So it's really important to understand that ransomware is them putting the flag up and letting you know that they're there, because now they want to get paid. And realistically, what we want to avoid is, we often get asked, does Sophos protect against ransomware? And the answer is yes, we absolutely do our best in a number of different technical ways through software to stop that. But the reality is you never want to get to this stage. You want to be able to pick it up throughout here. Ideally, you never want them gaining remote access in the first place. So with that, I guess the second misconception is business email compromise in 365. So while that is something that you would probably hear a lot about, it's actually the small players that are doing that. That may be part of a bigger attack, but getting access to someone's email and then perhaps changing an invoice number or something like that on a payment where they might be able to make a little bit of money, that's quite small. The ultimate goal for them is to get into an environment, being able to run commands on either computers like Windows endpoints or Linux or Mac, doesn't matter what it is, or servers. That's their ultimate goal. They want to get in somewhere where they can start executing code and start stealing more data than you just can get from an email. Now, we published just very, very recently the Active Adversary Report for tech leaders. Now, this is really, really good read if you haven't already seen it. And what this is, every year we release a report on what we're seeing from our incident response service. It's called Rapid Response. So the stuff that we see real world. And this is a summary of what we've already seen in the first 6 months of this year. Now, there's some interesting stats that I wanted to raise out of this report. And really, these are the three big ones. We've got a couple more as well. But interestingly, 90% of ransomware attacks occur outside standard work hours. So you can see the numbers there. And I guess that's the big highlight there for you, is that this stuff is happening when it's outside of business hours. It's outside of when customers are generally in their environments. But more importantly, you as MSPs, it's outside of when you are likely to have your desk staffed as well and be looking at alerts. That's the main thing I wanted to highlight there. The ransomware dwell time has almost halved since 2022. So you can see there we talk about how it's come down from 9 days to 5 days. And what dwell time is, that's the time from the last slide where they get that initial access and they dwell in the environment before they ultimately deploy ransomware. So we've seen that drop from 9 days to 5, and that's really for a number of, really two reasons why we think that's happening. One is that our detections are getting better, so we're able to see it more and people are more prepared and know what they're looking for. But equally on the attacks front, they know that and they're getting what they need to get done quicker. They're getting in and out basically a lot quicker now. So it's, you need to act fast is the main point there. And then attackers take less than a day to reach Active Directory. So that was a really interesting stat that came out of the first half of this year, that once they get in, as you can see, it's an average of 16 hours to be able to reach Active Directory as in your domain controller and have ownership of that. So for example, if something happens on a Friday night at 11 p.m., midnight, by Saturday, they've already got domain privileges and they own the network at that point. Now, a couple of other stats that I thought were interesting to call out in the first 6 months. So compromised credentials accounted for 50% of the root causes, whereas exploiting a vulnerability came in at 23%. So that's actually flipped around from the entire 2022 stats. Vulnerabilities were the largest thing we saw in the attacks we investigated. So they're still there, they're still very prominent, and I can tell you vulnerabilities are still a huge problem and can sometimes be chained together with this, but it is really interesting to see compromised credentials, 50% of root causes, so 1 in 2. Now, the second one that I wanted to highlight is actually quite disappointing. So we were able to identify that MFA, multi-factor authentication, was not configured in 39% of the cases we've investigated so far. The reason I wanted to call that out is that means in more than 1 in 3 of those attacks, we still don't have the basics done right. MFA is still not deployed everywhere. Now, I'm sure many of you on the call are thinking, well, I've got MFA, I've got it on my 365 account, it's enforced. That's true, but where a lot of people get let down on this is through things like VPNs that might be still there. They might be legacy, they might be still in production. VPNs often get forgotten about with multi-factor, and then other methods of access into the environment as well, or access into the data. It's unfortunately still a big problem, which is a shame to be saying that in 2023, but it's true. Now, I'm going to stop talking about attackers now. We're going to start to pivot a little bit more to MDR and really what outcomes they solve for you as the MSPs or as the partners reselling the service, and then for your customers as well. So we've got a couple of the top use cases here, and Cam, feel free to chime in if you think there's any more here, but really the big ones are, so expert-led response, meaning that we bring the human part to you. So we all know how hard it is to hire people. We bring that human investigation to what's going on in the environment as both from us detecting something, but also for your teams to be able to escalate things over to us. We bring that to you, and it's all part of that core service. It's there. There's no limits to it. We are there for you to support you in what we're seeing. The vendor consolidation one is interesting. So we all know how many different vendors we have as MSPs in the stack. We know we have a product that will do your endpoint protection and firewalls, and we have other products doing various different components, whether it's MFA or part of the Microsoft stack. There's a lot of different vendors involved. we're trying to bring that vendor consolidation down as the MDR layer sits above all of those vendors for you. So while you can still use these products, because we encourage you to use the best product for the best outcome, we can bring that MDR service over the top to watch over all of those for you, which really helps. And it means you don't have to be thinking about watching alerts from this tool and how do you programmatically combine that into your PSA ticketing solutions, and then how do you manage it yourself. And then reducing the workload. So that's the really big one. We see a lot of reduced workload for internal teams because you don't need those really high skilled people to be able to deal with what MDR is telling you to do. And you'll see some real life cases. I've got some examples coming up later in these slides to show you sort of the outcomes of what you would see from an investigation, and very clear instruction on what to do.
And Aaron, I think on that note, we talk about this all the time. I mean, the reduced workload doesn't mean that the MSP or the partner has less to do in that customer's environment. There's so much to do and so much that can be more meaningful in that customer's environment that I often talk about reduced workload, but at the same time, there's so much work to be done in those environments to where they can focus better without the expert to do that. So
yeah, it's a really good point you make there, because it is, while we're reducing the workload of having to deal with the noise and then having to scramble and figure out what an alert or an investigation actually requires, you can repurpose that into, like you said, more proactive things, really focusing on things that are either going to make more margin, make better outcomes for you as the MSP, but also just better for the humans. They're not wasting their time on the hard stuff that they may or may not be skilled to do. So you can repurpose them to do much more proactive stuff. So yeah, really good point, Cam. But I think realistically, the top outcome, like the absolute top outcome of MDR, it can be summarized in 3 words, and ultimately that is peace of mind. We are giving partners and customers, MSPs, everyone downstream of the MDR service, we're giving you peace of mind that someone is there watching, ready to take action, whether we detect something or whether you have a query or you see something odd in your environment, you can escalate it over to the SOC, the operations team, and they will investigate it for you. And they're there ready for your phone calls, your emails, whatever it is. So, all right, I think, Cam, it's probably time. Let's start talking about Sophos MDR for Defender.
Perfect.
Okay, so MDR for Defender. So we'll start with Defender and we'll talk about a couple of the Microsoft plans, because this is a very summarized, condensed version of Microsoft licensing, because I know all too well that this is absolutely, you need a degree to understand it really inside out. But when we're talking about the security part, we're just going to very basically talk about here. You can see what we've got highlighted. When you're using Microsoft 365 Business Standard, you get endpoint protection, but you don't get a lot of it. You just get an endpoint agent. When you move into Business Premium, that's when you really do. You get endpoint protection, full protection, you get EDR capabilities. It's a bit of a blend between multiple plans at that point. When you start shifting up into E3, it's interesting. Business Premium has a lot more than what E3 offers. You get endpoint protection, you don't necessarily get as much of the EDR or XDR or any of it. But then, of course, when you go to E5, that's really when you do get the full stack from Microsoft. But a really common misconception from customers and some MSPs I speak to is that E5, even going all the way up, and as you move them up through the licenses, that you are getting a managed service on the back of that, as in Microsoft's going to be there 24/7 to respond and deal with these things. And that's actually not true at all. And you'll see, I've got some simpler slides to show that. So when we talk about what MDR can do and how we do it, we're really talking about strengthening Defender with MDR. We're not talking about replacing it. This is an outcome or a solution that you can take to market that for those customers that want to use Defender, they want to use things that come with their license, we can strengthen that on top with MDR. And those licenses, I guess on that topic, Cam, we hear this all the time, right? I've paid for my Microsoft licenses. It includes endpoint protection, so I want to use it. Now, I'm sure everyone on the call here today has various subscriptions with various people. Amazon Prime is a classic example. Amazon Prime includes so many different things, and you probably only use one component of it. It doesn't mean you need to use them all. Things just get thrown into bundles. So it's important to really understand that. And when we start to talk about what MDR is in the 365 landscape, I think this slide here shows really well that in Defender for Endpoint, even when E5. So we're talking about the endpoint solution now. You get expert-led threat hunting. That's something that Microsoft do for you, but nothing really else is there from a human perspective, from an MDR, a managed detection and response service. That's really the only key feature they're doing. So they do threat hunting, and if they find something, they create a case in the ecosystem for you then to continue that investigation. It's really just an automated thing that hand over to you. When we look at Defender with Sophos MDR Essentials, which is, I'll talk about what that is, but that is ultimately the MDR for Defender play here. These are the things that you're getting out of an MDR solution. And the real important part in all of this is that, we're there 24/7 for you. You're getting reporting, you're getting intelligence, you're getting a whole bunch of different things, but the threat response, that's the really important piece here that we're talking about. So you have threat response from us, meaning that we see something, or you call in and let us know something, we investigate, we can stop it, we take action for you, whether that's 2 a.m., 2 p.m., it doesn't matter, we are there for you. And then of course, when we move up the stack to our MDR Complete offering, which is in this offering, it's where you use the Sophos products on your endpoints as well. That's where we offer everything we possibly can at that level. So that is sort of like our E5, if you will, that's our top tier, but you have to be using our products. So when we shift into this and we start narrowing that down a little bit more, this is where MDR for Microsoft Defender fits. It's not a different SKU. So for those of you looking up price books and wondering why you can't find MDR for Defender, it's not going to be there because it is our Sophos MDR Essentials offering. So from a pricing perspective, we still only have 2 tiers, 2 SKUs. It's very easy in that regard. But this is a solution that you can take to market with Sophos MDR for Microsoft Defender. And we'll go into a little bit more detail now explaining how that works. But as I showed you on the last slide, this is really where you're getting all of these core things, but you can still, the customers can still be running that Defender for endpoint on their machines. And if they want to take advantage of Defender products, Defender features, that's no problem at all because we integrate with that very, very tightly and pull all that data through. So going into really just that in a little bit more detail. So when I talk about integrating with Defender, these are the sources that we're talking about over here on the right. So if we look here, there's quite a number of sources. And for those of you that are familiar with Defender and know it and know the licensing well, these will be familiar to you. For those of you that aren't, I don't blame you. It's a very hard thing to get across. But realistically, when we talk about Defender, the word Defender gets thrown around interchanges a lot. And as you can see, Microsoft have Defender for everything. But Defender for endpoint is their antivirus EDR solution. That's the thing that you install on the machines. That's generally what we're going to be focusing on here when we talk about it today. But we do tap into all of these other Defender solutions as well, part of the ecosystem. And one of the ones that most people are concerned the most about is this identity. Sorry, that says information protection in Azure AD. That's really the identity protection component. So really talking about compromised credentials. That's really the one that most people are concerned about with business email compromise. But the idea here is if you're running Defender for endpoint, so you're running Defender on your machines or your customers are, that's fine, that's great. Defender will do that protection part. It will act as your antivirus and you can use any other features of Defender that you choose to use, but then we'll be there monitoring and investigating anything that the Defender product picks up and blocks. We'll also be stopping things and detecting things from our own agents as well, which I'll talk about in a moment, but basically you're sort of getting 2 eyes looking at your machines, both Defender and both Sophos as well. We pull all of that data off your machines and that telemetry, I should say, not data, that security telemetry, and we're investigating that and doing our own threat hunting. And of course, you've got that SOC. You have that MDR, those MDR analysts that you can call or email whenever you're concerned about something and they can investigate that for you. So it works really, really well. Now, expanding on that data, when we talk about what MDR is a much more holistic approach now, when you understand that we can tap all of this stuff from Microsoft Defender, that's great, but still don't forget about the other stuff that Sophos MDR can do. So we obviously tap into any Sophos products that you might be running, but then more so, we can pull things from firewalls, third-party firewalls, network solutions, productivity. This is Google Workspace, you'll see here as well. Your public clouds, your identity providers such as Duo, that's very popular in the MSP space, and then other email spam solutions as well, such as Mimecast and Proofpoint. And I guess it's important, I know that today's theme is Microsoft Defender, It's really important to understand that this same thought process, this same solution about MDR for Defender, that can be used for other endpoints and any other endpoints as well. I've just got some logos here, but the idea is that we can overlay MDR on top of any solution that you're running, and we can tap that as well. So the idea there is you could be running Sophos MDR for semantic, Sophos MDR for Trend Micro, Sophos MDR for CrowdStrike, and so forth. So we will overlay over any of those things and be able to take that telemetry and then deal with it for you.
And Aaron, I think we hear this all the time about new customer environments, and as MSPs start to onboard a new environment and perhaps using Defender, being able to tap into all these third parties and not have that rip and replace conversation straight away is key from what we're finding of the attach and the relationship building in that new environment. We hear that quite a lot, don't we?
Absolutely, and it's probably a slightly different story for resellers and partners on the call here today that are reselling the product into other networks, because this helps you because you don't control that stack. So you'll be able to ask the questions, do the discovery, understand what they're using, and then build the MDR solution with the right integrations to fit. With MSPs, as you mentioned, Cam, MSPs generally prefer a standardized stack, and that's fine. And if you've standardized on Sophos, or maybe it is Microsoft now, you can see how MDR can layer on top. But as Cam mentioned, if you bring on a new client and they do happen to be running a Mimecast firewall, Meraki firewall, or a Fortinet, or whatever the case may be, no problem at all. You can still bring MDR on to help you as the MSP. You tap that third party, and it makes a very neat ecosystem and visibility across everything. So on that visibility, that's really what we do. So we take this here in, and we take all these data sources that we've just spoken about, all the Microsoft data sources, the non-Microsoft telemetry sources, and we pull all of that in. Now, anyone that's been through other vendors or have spoken about collecting logs, I'll ask one thing of you. It's very easy to pull in and ingest logs. That's stupidly easy to do. It's really about what you do with those logs. So I would challenge anyone to ask that question of any other person that's talking about ingesting logs and say, it's great that you're collecting them and putting them in a big bucket, but what are you actually doing with them? Because that's where our detection pipeline, as we call it, really changes the game, because we're taking in these third parties. We're not just storing them in a bucket, so then if we need to investigate, we can go and look at them. We are actively mapping them, collecting them, as you can see here, contextualizing and correlating them together in different paths. And I won't go too technical deep dive on what that means today, but effectively think of it as all this noise is coming in, as you can see here, very unstructured, all over the place, different vendors that don't follow a standard. We actually clean all that data up, we map it, we put it together, we put it into buckets as what we call clusters. That's the correlation bit. And we spit this out nice and clean at the end. That helps our analysts and ultimately helps you and our customers as well, being able to have a clearer picture, and then of course us write detections and figure out what we need to investigate from just that third-party data. That's where we get that human-led threat response. The threat hunting goes on top of all that data, and then as the MDR service does, that's what we do for you. So moving into how we do that with Microsoft specifically, so or any third party, I should say, really. So we have what we call the lightweight sensor, and we have a full agent. Now, the full agent is when you're using that's the Sophos Intercept X, as many of you may know it. That's our antivirus solution. So you would use that with you have the option to use it with MDR Essentials or MDR Complete. So you have the option to use that product if you like. The lightweight sensor, this is where, if you're using using Microsoft Defender on your endpoint products, or your customers are, that's where we drop this little lightweight sensor that sits next to Defender. Now, that doesn't do any type of protection. It's not doing any antivirus, anti-malware. That's not what this lightweight sensor is for. This is to align just to sit next to the Defender product, and it allows us to monitor behaviors going on the machine. So we do our own detections, so detections only, not protection. We monitor the behaviors of what's being ran and what the network connections and things are. And we also have our reputation data going into that as well. So we can then make our own detections and cases purely based off our sensor alone. So that's a really good sensor, and we could pick up a huge amount from that. Then, of course, we're tapping through our API integrations with Microsoft. We're getting all the data that Defender is doing as well. So if Defender blocks something and it's a high priority alert, great, we pick that up and we'll start investigating that immediately. That little agent also allows us to take action on your customers' machines as well. So for example, something happens at 2 a.m. Because we've got our agent there, we are able to jump in and we're able to block things. We're able to force different log offs and remove malicious artifacts, terminate processes, et cetera, et cetera. So that agent is how we get in and we're able to run what we really need to run on those machines. But Defender is still being your endpoint protection. Now, I'll show you some real world stuff. I said I would talk about some real world cases. So just to give an example, these are a couple of real life detections that came through. So if we look here, we look at the top and we can see that there was a detection from Microsoft Graph. That's the API that we connect to. And it was for someone attempting to turn off Microsoft Defender on this particular device. So as you can see, the MDR team at our end, we then investigated, and we do this through our agent. So we then went in and checked, and we could see that the actual registry key was successfully changed, and it was done via reg.exe. So that means someone from the command line has actively tried to turn off Windows Defender, and as you can see, the changes were successful. We observed that the registry keys were modified. So that then comes back to as us, okay, so we can confirm this has happened. We now would talk to whoever our contacts are, either yourself, the MSP, or the customer, depending on how you want to structure it. And we'd say, please confirm if this is expected. Was this you? Otherwise, please let us know, because we're going to have to jump in and start taking action, because that means there's an attacker on your network trying to turn off Windows Defender. Looking at a second one, this one was a little bit different, but again, it was another detection where we saw a potentially phishing document located here in this path. And then you can see the action that we took as MDR. So we're able to verify that the file is no longer present. We reviewed the running processes, and the file originated from that, which is whatever that is, a hidden executable to sync remote servers, a legitimate component of Microsoft Outlook. The user opened the PDF file at that exact time and then immediately deleted the file. The attached CSV contains the birth, time, and deletion of the file. Because the file was removed from the disk, we're going to complete the case, because we haven't seen anything else. So what I'm trying to show you here is that we get these detections from Microsoft, and this is the real human part that we're doing for you. And you can see that we're taking that on board, we're doing that investigation, and that's really where we're taking that workload off you as the MSP or the IT team or whatever it is that you are to the customers. And finally, I've got one more here that I wanted to show you. This one was a little bit more interesting. So this was another detection, but this was for a threat actor Storm 867. So Microsoft tracks these threat actors as particular weather patterns now. That's how they do it. And basically, as you can see, it talks about the cluster activity known using this particular caffeine platform. So, whatever that is in the hacking world. Now, as you can see, the MDR team then goes in to explain to you exactly what that is. So the caffeine platform allows people to try and steal credentials. That's the point. The file helpline final paycheck acknowledgement was detected in this user's downloads folder. And then the MDR reviewed activity on the device, did not observe any suspicious execution or network connections from the host. The host was offline at the time of investigation. After escalating, what we mean is the MDR team speaking to our contacts, either the customer or yourself. The client is planning on rebuilding the host to remediate, meaning they don't want to know about this. They're just going to burn the machine to the ground and start again. So you can see here how we're helping and what we're doing for you 24/7. Okay, so Sophos MDR, tell me more, Cam. I'm glad you asked. I'll go into a little bit more about MDR itself just to help build the picture, but hopefully you understand now what we can do for that Microsoft piece, specifically Defender for Endpoint. So MDR, in case you didn't know, you don't know what MDR is at all, this is really a snapshot of what MDR can do for you. So we have over 17,500 MDR customers. I've just been advised this morning it's now 18,000, so I can't keep up my slides. That was 17,500 last month, so it's rapidly growing the service. And realistically, what we're doing is we're doing that threat hunting, so proactively looking through customers' environments without detections, looking at the data and seeing if there is any signs of malicious activity based on intelligence that we receive from government sources or other vendors, whatever the case may be. The threat detection, that's what we've just spoken about. So if there's a detection, we are investigating and we're responding for you. And then of course the incident response. And that incident response, a lot of people don't really understand what like full scale incident response is. But that goes beyond just we've picked up a detection, we've investigated, and it's stopped at that machine. This incident response is, okay, something's occurred, we've investigated, we can see that someone's been logging in as your administrator legitimately. Perhaps it's without multi-factor authentication for the last 2 weeks, and they've just been sitting there as a legitimate user, not doing anything malicious, but they've just been in your environment. This needs full-scale incident response, as in we need to do a forensics, we need to figure out how this happened, we need to produce reports. It's potentially a cyber insurance type scenario that you need to claim on. Maybe there's data leakage, that kind of thing. So these are all the things that come under that incident response layer. That's very much getting to the scenario that you don't want to get to. Now, of course, we do all this and our average response times are quite quick. So as you can see, so 38 minutes is the average there. So we've been doing this for the last 4.5 years, I think it is now. And yeah, that's our average response times over that time. Now, we deliver this from a global coverage. So we have SOCs all across the globe. And as you can see, we effectively run in a follow the sun model. So at any one point, we have 2 of our SOC locations open, and that allows, coverage and things across the globe. But there's over about 500-600 SecOps staff running this thing on any given day. So yeah, it's a large beast, and it does a great job at it. So just coming back to that data, I'd like all the MSPs on the line or partners or whatever the case may be, just to think about how much data you do have. What I mean by that is security data and logs across your environment. So we've got a very simplistic network diagram here, but just think about what is producing logs that you may not be looking at today, and you're probably definitely not looking at 24/7. So for example, your email, just your spam filtering, that has great logs showing what's going through, even if it doesn't block. A lot of people put these products in and put them in a set and forget model. Even firewalls go in as like well, that's going to block stuff for me, I don't need to look at it. And realistically, the logs tell you a very, very large story. Even if things are flowing through that weren't blocked, the logs can tell you that. So email, huge amounts of telemetry, endpoint logs. It's quite scary to see how many people aren't even investigating stuff that Sophos antivirus tells them and is flagging for them and alerting them about. It's often just sort of, again, a set and forget, which is really dangerous in today's sort of security climate. So firewalls I touched on, identity, for example. So Microsoft 365, Azure AD. There's a stack of information in those logs and a lot of alerts from Microsoft that, again, it's just hard. It's hard for MSPs. It's hard for customers to be able to keep on top of that stuff and review it all. Then, of course, we get into cloud environments, so public cloud, private cloud, and public workloads that don't have servers as such. They just have these public workloads. And again, there's a lot of telemetry there to look at and get on top of. So that's really why we've built the MDR service as we have. So the idea here is that it's compatible with your environment and compatible with your needs. We're really bringing those people and the processes and the technology to be able to harvest all of that data, investigate it, and then take action. So we're trying to do that across these major categories, really, like across whatever you're using on your endpoint, your firewall, your cloud providers, your email providers, your identity providers, and then, of course, any network layer security that you have going on as well. Probably worth pointing out, Cam, these are not the only logos that we support. It's just what we have on this particular slide. So we are bringing new integrations to life all the time. There's a stack that's going to be coming in the next sort of month or two as well.
Yeah, I think you were saying about 2 a quarter. Almost every quarter we have about another 2 security integrations coming in. Is that reasonably accurate?
We actually have quite a lot backed up at the moment, as in they're built, ready to go. We've just got some challenges getting them out the door from some other development work that's going on. But come November, we should see that really open up. And Cam, I actually think it might end up being a lot more than 2 a quarter. I think it'll end up being, quite rapid as it gets on. So we've got a dedicated.
Like if we do have an event in an environment, the richness of that information that you can get out of all of these security tools, basically, it's quite amazing seeing some of the reports when they've got endpoint, when they've got firewall, so you can prove whether data was exfiltrated or not off the network. It's quite interesting in some of those reports that I have read when things have gone bad for some environments not fully protected.
Yeah, and it's really interesting when we pull a detection or a case from something just from a firewall. Like I've got an example coming up from a Fortinet, but then we're able to pivot. So, but the humans will the alert may initiate from a Fortinet, but then we'll pivot and we'll double check all of the endpoint data and all of the, maybe the Azure AD logs and things like that. We pull all of that into one case and investigate it for you. So yeah, really doing that work. But we also have a lot of automation involved as well to try and collect similar things together into, I guess, what we call clusters, right? So if it's a similar IP address that's come from your firewall alert and then maybe your spam filter and your identity, it's all attached to a user, we cluster all those alerts together. So we're able to investigate that as one rather than 10,000 individual logs.
Yeah.
So that's really, as we've just said, that's really what we're doing here. We're taking all of these categories that I just spoke about, we're pulling all of that in, we're contextualizing it, we're correlating it, and we're making it meaningful and doing something with it, with our mean time for remediation being 38 minutes. So just looking ahead, I'll give you, I brought one more example for you, which this one's from a firewall. So I just wanted to call this one out. Now, I know there's a lot of text on this screen and I don't expect you all to read it, but I'm going to summarize it for you. So in this scenario, we had a FortiGate, so a Fortinet FortiGate firewall alerted it about a WooCommerce plugin in WordPress. So WordPress, very popular website platform, and there's some very well-known vulnerabilities in various plugins for that. And in this scenario, you can see it's explained what the WordPress plugin problem was, and you can see that the Fortinet alerted about it, but as you can see here, additionally, according to the article, the Fortinet article, protects this against this vulnerability in this version 25607. So when we see what the MDR team recommend, so they've investigated it, they've looked at it, but as you can see here, if you glance your eyes here, as the host does not currently have MDR installed, this hinders our ability to investigate further. So the humans did get this alert from the firewall, they've researched what that means, they've grabbed the data, they went to jump onto the machine internally and figure out what extra happened and found there was no MDR agent there, which means we can't sort of do that next part for you. So that's what leads to the recommendation. So we're just suggesting to block that particular IP that triggered it in the firewall, ensure that the plugin's up to date so you're not vulnerable to it. Alternatively, make sure your FortiGate system's running that version where it will actually block it, and then confirm actions taken back to us so then we can clean up and investigate further. So you can see there how it works. And really, when I spoke about tier one analysts being able to understand what's being recommended to them, that takes a relatively complex alert that's come through from a firewall that someone's probably not looking at and puts it into sort of these 3 key recommendations in clear text. So very, very easy to deal with, and that's sort of the attraction for MSPs. Now, Cam, I'll get off this stuff. I might talk about something new, which is the incident response retainers. So I know this can cause a lot of confusion for people, but it really ties in neatly with MDR for Defender and that MDR Essentials plan. So we spoke about that incident response earlier, that full-scale incident response. Now, if you use MDR Complete, our top tier where you have to run Sophos on your endpoints, we include incident response, that full-scale. We include it completely, unlimited amounts, no limits at anywhere really, it's just there. So we're going to do all of that forensic, we're going to do all of that report creating. Again, you never want to get in that situation, and there's a very low chance that you will with MDR, but we include it nonetheless. With MDR Essentials, when you're running third-party endpoint protections and things like that, we obviously can't include that at an unlimited amount. So we don't, it's very hard for us to be able to do that when it's not our own technology. So we have retainers available for you to buy in advance of needing incident response. So as you can see here, it's available to MDR Essentials customers. So we're adding the ability then to do that incident response to the service. So it gives you a rapid, so we offer this service as something called rapid response, and it's available to anyone, rapid response, anyone on the planet. We investigate incidents for anyone, non-Sophos customers, Sophos customers, you name it, we do that every day. So if you have a retainer in place, we guarantee you a 4-hour start time. So if something kicks off, the MDR Essentials team sees it, and you have this retainer in place, we can kick off within 4 hours to that sort of full-scale incident response. That reduces your risk as well, because we're doing a whole bunch of upfront things as part of this retainer. So vulnerability scans, we're giving you incident response preparedness guides, so basically allowing your customers with templates and guides to get their IR plans ready, and also providing you with threat intelligence webinars as well as part of this incident retainer. And this retainer is available, of course, to MDR Essentials or MDR for Defender customers, as we've been speaking about today, but it's also available to anyone. So literally anyone. You don't even need to be a Sophos customer today to buy this incident response retainer. And effectively what that looks like is you buy it in 3 different buckets, small, medium, or large, and you get this much credit against incident response should you ever need it. So It includes these things. So as we mentioned, we just spoke about it, vulnerability assessment reports and various guides and things like that for the customers to be ready for their IR plans. But yeah, it basically gives you a prepaid credit and an SLA against the IR service when you need it. So I know that's confusing. It's probably the first time many of you may have heard of this type of service. So feel free to reach out to us and we can take you through it in more detail. So probably just shifting now as we sort of move to how does this really benefit you, the MSP? So we've spoken about the technology and the outcomes for the customers, which impact you as well. But talking specifically about you, the MSP. So ask yourself these questions with all of the context that we've gone through here today. Do you have staff and time to review all the detections in your environment and your customer security product consoles 24/7? I used to be an MSP for many, many years, and I know the answer there to me was no. As much as I probably wanted to say yes, the reality is it just was impossible. Now, could you and your team action threat hunts when necessary to further security? So, we get some vendor alert, some big thing from Microsoft. Do you have people available? Do you have the technology available to go hunting in your customers' environments to see if they've potentially already been breached? And do you have an incident response plan in place to deal with any major breach or 0-day for you, the MSP, or your customers? Do you have those plans in place now? For many MSPs I speak to, it's yeah, sure I do, but it's kind of up here in one person's head. It's always good to have those plans formally documented, who you would contact.
And I think that's a good topic that leads into if we actually see that outbreak, how many people in the team are working on that? I mean, I know you've said before, sometimes it can be up to 40 people.
40, 50 people, yeah, will work on an incident.
Yeah. So I think, for anyone to scale to that straight away is very, very difficult.
Absolutely. So look, simplifying that, how would your MSP handle this scenario? So real world scenario, right? So let's talk about, we spoke about that every time they do something, it's generating some kind of signal, there's some kind of noise. So let's talk about these sort of key points. Now, let's say this is Sally. Sally, Sally is working there. Sally is unusual that she's logged in at 2 a.m. on a Sunday, but for some reason she's running PowerShell. Now, she's running PowerShell via remote desktop, which is very unusual for Sally because Sally doesn't know what PowerShell is. Sally doesn't work at 2 a.m. So straight away, this is interesting. Would your MSP be able to see this? Now, for example, through all these things, these are sort of 3 different metrics there across the environment. It's a very simplistic example, but it gives you an idea of how all of these different pieces of signals or telemetry, when you combine them together, individually, Sally using RDP might not be a sus thing. Sally running PowerShell, maybe we're getting a little bit more. Maybe she does run PowerShell from time to time. Sally doing it at 2 a.m., I don't know. Sometimes Sally can't sleep. She does do stuff at 2 a.m. Combining all that together, maybe not, right? It's more of a problem than that. So that leads to an investigation. And that's really, would your MSP team be able to handle that? The answer is probably not. And it's sort of why I believe so strongly in this message that cybersecurity has become too complex for most organizations to manage effectively. So realistically, I think we should probably just skip ahead a little bit here, Cam, and just make sure we stay on time. But for you all trying to build a security practice, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to build a SOC. You can outsource things to us as part of MDR, and that really helps you so you don't have to try and build this internal SOC. I tried, I failed, it wasn't worth it. I ended up using Sophos MDR. Yeah, it gives you an escalation point for your technical staff, which is really, really important. And it gives your sales teams confidence in your security operations, knowing that you're backed by a leading global cybersecurity vendor doing that for you and doing the hard stuff. So Cam, did you want to take everyone through the packaging and the bundling and a couple of different options there?
Yep, no, sounds good. We'll chat through this. So yeah, if you can move to the next slide, that'd be excellent. So we talk often to MSPs around this point, Aaron, is making sure that contracts with end customers are dated. Like we see this a lot of the time where, luckily as MSPs, we retain our end customers for a long, long time, but it doesn't sort of focus to that time where we then re-sit down with our end customers and have that security conversation with them. So our recommendation here and what we see working really, really well across our MSPs is making sure those agreements are dated and they're aware that you're going to be having a security conversation around new tools, new posture recommendations on a quite regular basis with them. So I strongly recommend that happens in that space. And then another thing we get a lot of the time is MSPs, and if they do have something that looks suspicious on their customer's environment, they'll almost give that technical support time away. That's costing them a lot of money. They're probably not skilled to do that the most efficient way. So we generally say to unbundle those line items, definitely from your technical support side of things, compared to your security tools and your managed detection and response, obviously. I think we have that discussion day in, day out with MSPs, Aaron, and a lot of MSPs will say, yeah, no, something does happen. We do best efforts to try and help our end customers out. But I think as we see the whole environment become trickier in those areas, it's very, very important that you decouple couple that. The other thing we see is sometimes bundles. I mean, bundles nowadays work for some partners, but I'm finding that we're probably moving away from security bundles a little bit more because I think the average end customers are really quizzing what they're getting out of those bundles a lot more from what we're seeing nowadays. So definitely the bronze, silver, and gold, or whatever you want to call those bundles and be creative, still works and still a good idea, but I'd be recommending probably other things that you can help that end customer with that are going to be more meaningful. And that might be, helping them with something to automate their own business. It might not even be security side of things, but certainly we're seeing MSPs making more meaningful margin out of maybe reports or maybe XDR searches across a customer's environment, but really being creative with those bundles rather than just a tiered level of security, I think would be our recommendation on creating the cybersecurity bundles and agreements.
Yeah, excellent. For everyone on the call, we do have Q&A coming up. So if you do have questions, feel free to pop it into the Q&A box.
Good point.
All right, Cam, what about this one?
This one, really important. I mean, well, I think we had some nervous MSPs initially when this started happening, and we were very, very successful in this earlier on out of North America, but we've seen this filter down into Australia and New Zealand very, very well. And what this is it's literally an opt-out letter. It takes them through why the recommendation for bolstering their security environment, why you need 24/7 in a very simplistic way. It's literally 2 pages. But then it asks them to opt out of the service, and it's quite interesting. I mean, some partners have mixed this around to an opt-in. I would strongly suggest that you keep it as an opt-out, and it's worked very, very well for some of our MSPs that have already had customers on the books and not had 24/7 monitoring to help them bolster their security, or for customers that you're winning as new customer logos into you as an MSP as well. But works very, very well, and the few partners that have scaled this out have certainly done some awareness building for it first before sending this letter out, and we've got very good campaigns through our partner portal that would take you through that, but it has had a very good percentage and success rate. And I would probably add there as well is, even if they don't opt in, you've done that. So you've done that duty as an MSP to be trying to take your customers on this journey. I mean, obviously, if they're not going to come on the journey straight away, you can't always do it. But I think it's very important that you're attempting to advise them on what is necessary nowadays.
Yeah, it's almost the most important part, Cam, because you've done your bit, and if they've opted out, then if they do get hit, not that we like to say told you so, but it gives you that sort of line in the sand, so to speak, about you really encourage that, and here we are. So.
Absolutely, and this is available to any Sophos partner signed up. It's in our Sophos portal. There's a wealth of information in our Sophos portal as well on top of this, but strongly recommend you look at this, and these links will be provided in follow-up to this session.
All right, Cam, so briefly, we might talk about the tiers. So we'll talk about the tiers, and then we'll get into Q&A.
Yeah, so I think this is important as well. In MSP Flex, we break down all of our licenses into categories. So user licenses by nature are things like mobile protection, endpoint protection, phishing awareness campaigns, anything that sort of attributes to a user style end user or person utilizing the license. The really interesting thing here is when we were talking about third-party plugins, they all fit into the user category as well, meaning that each of these tiers and bundles, as you see that move up, are substantial discounts for you as a partner or an MSP selling this on a monthly basis. So it can very, very easily help you move up in that user category specifically across all your customers and each of those user licenses that you're using. And the same thing with servers and our firewalls and any of our other products. They're all categorized, and you get better buying tiers automatically through our billing mechanisms as you scale across your customers.
Yeah, nice. So more margin, the more customers you get on, right? That's the end of the day. That's the point.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right, so we'll get into Q&A. So please, if you have questions, feel free to add them into the Q&A box. Cam, is there anything you wanted to ask, or is there anything that sort of stands out to you as a big question?
Look, I think we get the question a lot is if they are running Defender and they're using our lightweight sensor, is what sort of resources does that use when it's using the lightweight sensor? And I think I know the answer, but you'll probably answer that a lot better than me.
Yeah, look, it's very light. It's about 80 meg of RAM from memory. Don't quote me on that, but it's very, very light. It's not doing any of the protection. It's not having to block. That's the Defender's job, and that's the heaviest part of any endpoint protection solution. So we are really just sitting back. We are pulling off, the type of network connections that are going on, the processes that are running. We're pulling that up into our data lake so we can do that threat hunting, but more importantly, so we can make those behavioral engine detections. So it's really just collecting of data, and so we can do that work in the cloud. And then, of course, if we need to take action, we can jump down into it. So it's a very lightweight sensor. It uses about less than 10 meg of bandwidth a day from memory. So yeah, pretty light. That's nothing like an endpoint protection product. So
perfect.
Okay.
I think another one we get a lot as well is, and I know this differs and we can't comment too much on it, but from an insurance perspective. So how does this help from a posture perspective when customers or partners are filling in insurance paperwork for customers to get better insurance rates, or what's the view on?
It's a brilliant question because it does come up a lot, and it's a really, really good one to ask. So we'll start with insurance, but this bleeds into compliance as well. So when we talk about insurance, and you're probably quite familiar with the questions that you've answered from your customer cyber insurance forms, there's normally three big key ones that MDR sort of ticks those boxes for. The first one is, are you running EDR software? So EDR being not just antivirus products or any malware, that's just the protection layer, but EDR is that we're recording everything that's going on so you can really query and investigate later. If you refer back to the old Defender, the slide at the start where I spoke about Defender and the different plans, at that very basic level, Microsoft Business 365 standard, you're not getting an EDR tool. Putting this MDR in place, the lightweight sensor next to it, you are getting an EDR tool. So you tick that box. The second one is, are you aggregating security logs? So aggregating your logs so you can do security information on them. Again, that's another yes, because we're aggregating all of that security telemetry from endpoints, servers, 365, firewalls, identity providers, you name it, all of those different things, we're aggregating them and we're storing those logs for 90 days, which we can tap out to 365 should you need. And then the final one that really helps is, are you monitoring those logs 24/7? Because like I mentioned, it's easy to store logs. It's about what you do with it. So those three ones are normally tick, tick, tick. There's more where Sophos can help. And obviously, if you get MDR and you happen to be running our endpoint agent, we can tick a few more. But they're the big key ones for cyber insurance, which, yes, can help you to be more insurable. Today's market is quite interesting in terms of, will that save you money or not? I'm not an insurance broker, but it's worth talking to an insurance broker and finding out that, because you might shop around, and having a 24/7 service, an MDR service, is absolutely beneficial to your insurance premiums. But also into the compliance. I mentioned compliance. So if you are starting to look at things like NIST framework or ISO 27001, or CIS controls, all of these frameworks are effectively asking the same thing, and these cyber insurance questions I just spoke about are coming from those frameworks. So the more of this you do, the more you can tick, and it not only are you ticking boxes, you're giving your customers and yourselves better cybersecurity posture at the same point. So it's not just a box ticking exercise. Did I just see a question coming, Cam? Yes, I did. So there's a couple coming through. I'll just try and open that chat a little bit further. So the first one was, okay, sorry, my screen's filling out. When the XDR lightweight sensor is deployed, can I use Live Discover in Central to query? Yes, the answer is yes. That's exactly the telemetry we're pulling up. So you can definitely run Live Discover either from the data in the data lake or on your endpoints as well. So yes, very good question. Next one, what licenses would a client with 90 staff running 365 Business Premium need to deploy Sophos MDR? Roughly how much per month per year? So, okay, so if they're running Microsoft 365 Business Premium and you need to put Sophos MDR on top, that will be the Sophos MDR Essentials tier. Cam, you could probably talk about pricing on that.
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly send out some pricing from this, but yeah, we'll probably send that out in follow-up to this, but yeah, definitely can make that available.
Okay, yeah, it's if you're in the partner portal already, just pop in the price list, you'll see it there. But yeah, is there ballpark, Cams, or just grab it from the partner portal?
Yeah, it just depends if it's a partner or an end customer focused one. But yeah, definitely anyone that's already signed up at the price list published in the portal, but I'll follow up on that one. Yeah.
Okay, no problem. Okay, when should we expect actions on third-party technologies like blocking something on the firewall? Great question. We have a whole bunch of automation coming very, very soon. It's coming in phases for different products. So, you know, for example, Microsoft 365 actions, third-party firewall vendors, there's a bit there. So if you haven't already seen Sophos Factory, go and Google it right now. That's our automation platform. That's available today as a standalone product, and it actually does all this already. We're baking that into the MDR product. There's a bit there because we have to change our integrations from read-only, which they are now, to third-party platforms to write permissions. So that is all happening now, and we should be seeing in November some things starting to come, you know, for different particular third-party vendors, and that's just going to increase over the coming months and quarters. So yeah, you'll see it soon. All right. Are those actions already implemented on Sophos technologies first? Yeah, there is some stuff coming in the latest Sophos firewall, for example. So you're going to see an MDR, there's an integration, a little bit like what we called synchronized security. It's sort of a next iteration of that, where the MDR team will be able to automatically put indicators of compromise. So IP addresses and various different things, automatically block them in your firewall states and do a bit more. There's a bit more to that. So stay tuned. I think that's, it's out now. I think the feature's in the firewall and it's due to launch, or maybe in the new beta firewall, and it's due to launch soon. I think it's November. Again, I know there's a lot of stuff happening in November for launch purposes. So conscious of time, should we move on, Cam?
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
So anyone that has further questions, we're going to have some contact details at the end. Please reach out to us. We're more than happy to help. We're happy to do sessions with you one-on-one and go through it in more detail if you need.
Yeah, and especially on pricing discussions, because we've got New Zealand and Australia on this call, it's probably better if we give you some accurate pricing, but yeah, happy to give pricing. I'm not trying to disguise it. So yeah, we'll definitely be able to cover that for you.
No problem. All right, well, Cam, I'll let you take this.
Yeah, no, I think this is really important. I mean, we see a lot of our MSPs being targets, and obviously it's important to make sure you're utilizing the NFR licenses, which are very, very heavily discounted. In fact, you know, all the software side of things is 100% discount in most cases, depending on how large you are as a partner, but in most cases it'll cover all your environment. But you know, we give very, very good discounts off hardware for your NFRs, but also off the MDR service is 45 points off. So we highly, highly recommend running this inside your MSP. And I know, Aaron, you did when you were an MSP, and you found, I won't say some interesting stuff, but you had one scare that wasn't interesting, but it's still.
It's always funny. It's always funny finding what your technicians are running at random times, and it freaks you out when you get that contact from the MDR team. But I tell you what, peace of mind, I can't attest to that more. So,
yeah. And the fact that you do have that alarm bell and that contact is the important piece, right? Because sometimes it's
and we'll probably move on to our incentive actually, Cam. Do you want to take us through
Yeah,
that?
so this one is more linked to our term side of licenses. So meaning our 1, 2, or 3 year quotes, and anything over $7,500 USD in deal value, and it doesn't matter on the term or the size of that end customer, you can win yourself a series of Apple Watches. So definitely something to look out for. And it really, the T's and C's on that is just getting confirmation that it was a Microsoft Defender alignment when we've attached with MDR Essentials. But yeah, absolutely available to you, and strongly encourage you to use that.
Excellent. All right. Well, Ingram, I'll let you guys wrap up. I think we're just on time.
Amazing. Thanks, Cam. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks to the rest of the Sophos team as well for making this webinar possible for us. And once again, thank you to all our partners, whether you're in Australia or in New Zealand, for joining. Again, if you have questions about the incentive, like you really want the Apple Watch, you've got questions about pricing, we did see that some of those came through. And again, it could be termed, it could be MSP. Regardless of it, please feel free to reach out to the team. So if you're in New Zealand and you don't know who exactly you should be speaking to, then definitely Grace Trinidad is your first point of contact, and she'll be able to guide you through that. I'm Nina, I'm the Sophos Vendor Business Manager here in Australia. So if you're based in AU and you've got some questions, regardless, again, MSP termed, Apple Watch, you just want to say hi to Aaron and Cam, feel free to let me know and we'll make sure we pass along the message. And last but not least, like we said, we did record this. We will be sending this through along with the handouts. So if you've got like a colleague or a friend or someone in your organization who you think would benefit from this, or you've got an end customer or someone you want to talk to more, definitely reach out to us and we'll get more content out to you. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next webinar.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.